ニメイトもどこに行ったのだ。
何言ってるのオカリ。そんなの秋葉にあるわけないよ。だからマユシーは中野まで同人誌を買いに行く。
お前メイクインでバイトしていたよな。
メイクインって
That checks out. That makes a lot of sense, right? Oh my god, imagine. Imagine.
それを否定する D メールを過去に送ったの。
Huh.
たった一通のメールで街が丸々改変されるなんて。
Interesting that Okarine actually thinks of that as the immediate possibility that she might have undone all of that, in comparison to my own immediate thought being, you know, her father, that he is back in her life after the D-mail. Ah, Mani Susaha. Ha.
メイクインがあった場所とはとても思えん。
メイクインってジャガイモ？
So Okarine hasn't explained it?
代わりにオカリンとマユシが参戦して、その時の対戦相手がフェイリス。
And?
オカリンたちは惨敗したんだけど、
Checks out.
その時からマユシとフェイリス。
Ah, look at that. Still.
昨日中野で買ったレイヤーさん写真集。
過去は変わっても結果的に現在の人間関係は変わってない。
Exactly. There is something about that.
つまりその女子メンバー限定ってこと。
Oh boy. Girls are on.
させてもらうってことで。
それにそもそも女子メンバー限定ならばそこの
It's going. Yeah, it's going there. They're addressing it.
この前教えただろ。ルカ子は正真正銘の男だと。
Oh yeah.
女の子に向かって男呼ばわりなんて。そういうこと言うのマユシー好きじゃないな。
さすがにまずく。
Ah. Oh no. Okay, Okarine. Understand and back up.
いやいやいや、謝るも何も俺は真実しか。
Oh.
岡部さんにそういう
Oh
風に見られてい
no.
たんですね。
いやいやいや、ルカ子、お前は男
いつ
だろ。
まで続ける気？
This is bizarre from Okarine's
担ぐのはよせ。お前は正真正銘の男だ。なぜならここに。ないぞ。
岡部さん、やめ。
That's crazy, man. That's a crazy writing choice.
お前、女なのか。
最初からそう言っとるだろうが。
That's crazy, man. That's such a leap in logic. It makes no sense for...
まさかマキセクリスに。
小一時間正座をさせられ。いや。
You kind of had it coming, man.
後なのだ。
なんだ、そんなの拷問に入らないよ。
まるで本当の拷問を受けたかのような口ぶり。
I mean, I hope not,
そりゃ
but
戦士だからね。
hey.
これを最後に言うのか。
Again, a sibling type relationship.
東京に来たのは父さんを捜索するためだったんだよね。
捜索。
Dad instead of mom. If this is our John Teeter.
なくて顔も覚えていないんだ。この町にいることは分かってるんだけ
Okay.
どね。
So that gives us about 4 possibilities, 3 or 4 possibilities.
父さんが持ってたピンバッ
Ah.
ジ。いろいろ事情があってね。でも一度だけチャンスはあるんだ。
I mean, here's a possibility right here.
ある場所に父さんが現れるかもしれない。それを逃したら私はこの町を離れなきゃいけないんだけどね。行かなきゃいけないところがあるの。私も多忙なわけよ。まあもともと会えなかったら諦めるつ
So it's more of like a self-imposed deadline?
マッドサイエンティストであるこの俺に相談して
Yeah, he's really quite attentive.
今日からラボメンナンバー008
Yes, finally.
俺たちの実験台となってもらう。
君っていいやつだね。
何？
なんかちょっとだけ楽になったかも。
This is Okabe Rintaro.
心配してくれてサンキュー。
いいか。明日父親に会えても会えなくても必ずラボに来い。お前の昇進を利用し D メール実験を。
Come on, man. She sees it.
マッドサイエンティスト、悪逆非道だね。
Wow. Oof, I have chills.
ではこれより作戦名 エルドフリーメ
Oh,
ールの概要について
Ruka came back? I guess they kind of
北欧神話
バイト選手が父親に会えたなら
patch things up?
東京での最後の晩餐を執り行う。
ダル君がいないよ。
That's right.
今はオフ会があるから参加できないなどとふざけたことを言ってきた。このメールを先ほど送っておいた。
フェイリスの手
He's always gonna pick Ferris.
どっちを選ぶのだ？
バイト選手を尾行し、状況を逐一報告する。
ごめんなさい。親子水いらずにさせてやりなさいよ。
Makes perfect sense
俺は尾行を
that Makise said that. That was crazy, man. That's just, it's a blemish. I believe that's a blemish, man. That's a terrible writing choice. The leap in logic is, there's an attachment.
オカリン
Red Jello. Okay, so immediate thought, CERN. But there's other possibilities as well, man.
そっか。
I spooked him, man. Rightfully so.
選手だもんね。選手と言ったらやっぱり辛口
And
だよ
that
ね。
might be by design if it's not CERN. But there's a good chance that is CERN.
ねえオカリン。なんか元気ないよ。
She's addressing it. I like it.
俺だ。機関の妨害によりオペレーションアウズンブラの実行
She might be able to tell his heart's not in it.
作戦資金の増額を要請する。
一番欲しい。
良いの明星か。
Oh, is that right? Oh, look at this.
オカリンって小学生の頃すごい熱出して寝込んだことあったよね。
世間では2000年問題が騒がれていた時期だったか。
Right around the year 2000, eh?
だからね、お空に祈ってたの。そしたら、
Oh,
流れ星がピューって一つ。マユシーは流れ星にオカリン死なないでって3回唱えたの。そしたら次の日にはオカリンの熱が下がって目を覚ましたんだ。急に見ているものがぐにゃぐにゃしてきて、立っていられなくてフラフラして体がビクッとなったって。この前フェリシちゃんのマンションでも
yeah.
そん
She's
な感じだったんだよ。
describing reading Steiner.
熱を出して倒れた時のあの感覚、世界線を移動した時の感覚にとても似ている。
Whoa.
ということは、マガン・リーディングシュタイナーは
Around the year 2000.
好みに宿ったということか。どうやら邪神の封印を解いてしまったらしい。もし1時間以内に連絡がなかったら
Tell my
両
parents.
親に伝えてくれ。愛していた。
Speaking of parents. Of course.
フェリスタンはいずこ
橋田、あんた騙されてるわよ。
おいオカリンふざけんなよ。せっかくタイムマシンオフ会だったのに。
タイムマシンオフ会？
僕がよく見に行く SF 関係の BBS のオフ会、プロの作家も来る予定だったのに。
No. Surely not. Daru? Is Daru Suzaha's dad? Maybe. But he said a professional writer. Also, as you can tell, I'm a little bit distracted by some of these bombshell moments, man.
私のいるアメリカの研究所って世界中から優秀な人たちが集まってるんだけど、みんなプライドが高くて結構殺
Really
伐と
professional
してる
setting,
の
right?
ね。
Cold.
それに比べてあんたのラボは
Exactly.
こっちだけど
That was clear
居心地がいい。
episodes ago. She likes being here.
ただなんとなくそう思っただけと。
These are her people.
俺は友達が欲しかっただけなのかもな。
私は仲間だと思ってるよ。前に言ってくれたでしょ。私のこと大切な仲間だって。
Yeah, he sure did.
あれ
He meant it.
嬉しかったっていうか。
熱でもあるのか。
Come on, man, this
何
guy.
よ何よ、せっかくあんたのこと見直してやってるのにこのバカ岡部。
Ah, nice.
すずさん遅いね。お父さんに会えたかな。
今頃水いらずの時間。
Again, makes sense that Makise is hopeful of
どちらに
that.
してもラボには来いと言ったはずなのだが、しかしこの時間ではもう遅い。作戦は中止だ。お前たちはもう帰れ。
Holy shit, it's actually really possible it could be Daru. Because Daru left, right? Ah, interesting.
つめ
Oh my god. Okay. There's still other openings though, but Daru actually could be.
一人寂しくこの町を離れるつもりなのかそんなことはこの法王院教魔が許さん
Yeah, Ocarine really kind of, took to Suzuha as well, like a little sister, you know?
そうだ D メールを使って今日の昼間の俺に何があっても鈴葉を尾行しろといいのかこれ以上 D メールを使っても過去を改変してもいいのか
君っていいやつだね。なんかちょっとだけ楽になったかも。
俺は狂気のマッドサイエンティスト法王院教魔何を恐れることがあるというのだ
That's how he justifies it, right? Oh my god. Goodbye. That's confirmation.
女子の脅迫に屈せず
This episode, man. Look at this, guiding himself. Oh god, from 0.40 to 0.33. Huh. But that's a big choice as well though, isn't it?
バイト戦士サボり中か
昨日は夜中まで上で騒いでたからさ、すっごい眠いんだよね。
俺たちは昨日の夜お前が父親に会えなかったので
Yeah, he's got no idea, right? He's gotta catch up.
最後の晩餐を開いたそうだな俺は一体どうやってお前を確保した
私がタイムマシンオフ会から帰ろうとしたら
There it
マ
is.
シンオフ会
There it is.
ここが父親の現れるかもしれないという場所だったのか
私の父さんはタイターって名乗ってるんだ。
Oh.
ジョンタイターか
ジョンじゃなくて
Oh.
バレルタイター。それも
What the hell is going on, man?
昨日は楽しかったな。
Good. Good.
マキセ・クリスさえいなければもっと楽しめた。
This is clever.
君たちのラボってさ、なんかいいね。みんなが仲良くていつも楽しそうで、あんな居心地のいい時間は
Look at that frame.
だったよ。
ならば遠慮はいらんいつでも来ればいいお前はもうラボメンなのだ
もうちょっとだけ頑張って父さん探してみるよ。
See that right there? That was my point about that also being a big choice, a major choice to stop Suzuha from leaving, right? And then of course, the satellite that's been lodged into the side of the radio building, gone. So official confirmation, as official as it can get, right? Wow. This episode, man, I mean, it's as perfect of an episode as it can really get. There's one blemish. But, other than that, this is just a phenomenal episode. It really could be the best so far. Wow. Exciting stuff, man. Exciting. Okay, so that's 10 episodes into Steins Gate. And this is really quite the fitting episode to hit that mark, right? Chaos Theory Homeostasis Part 3. Right now, they're not actually labeled as such. It's the exact same title for these past 3 episodes, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it's just meant to be, parts. Now, you'll have to let me know, why exactly they don't specify parts, if it's a translation thing or something. You'll have to let me know. But yeah, much to talk about, man. Like I said, it's essentially, it really could be the best episode of the series so far, right? Again, there's that moment, perhaps the worst moment of the entire anime. I mean, not perhaps, it is. It really is. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's just terrible writing. And of course, I'll get to that. I don't want to focus on that too much. I really want to focus on the best parts of this episode. And that's essentially the majority of this episode. Again, there's a bit of a, like I called it, a blemish. But the thing is, even so, it still kind of feels like a really, really significant episode. It's a strong episode, even though it has that bit in there. Now, the thing is, even though there is much to get to and it's exciting just the thought of it to tackle all of this, allow me to actually begin with something that might feel a bit strange, right? Or just a bit out of left field, but maybe not really out of left field, because something about this episode, a detail in this episode, actually made me think of this character much more, right? A character that I have not heard from or heard about since episode 1, Dr. Nakabachi, right? This is an elusive character. This is a super limited appearance character. But, now, once again, I'm thinking about this character because Daru said something really quite interesting that made me immediately kind of think of him as one of the candidates. And of course, I am speaking of Daru's missed, time travel forum that he was supposed to attend. But of course, he got pulled out because of Okarin, right? And his message tricked him. And, the thing is, Daru's actually, it's not just a playful thing. He's actually kind of annoyed about this, like legitimately annoyed. And, he tells him, there's even supposed to be a professional writer who was going to show up. So Daru actually is kind of annoyed about this whole thing, that because of Okarin, he's going to miss all of this, right? But then, of course, the connotations of this time travel forum, the thing, even before Amane Suzuha actually tells us that she also is or was meant to go to the time travel forum. Actually, she does go to the time travel forum, right? That's the thing that does happen, right? Daru is the one who doesn't go. And then, that just kind of almost really drives it home right in the closing moments of this episode, right? The connection that I kind of made, right? And the thing is, then it'd be a little bit silly to overlook the things that the anime is giving us at this point, it's kind of right there, a really strong possibility, right? That, Daru actually could be Suzuha's father, right? But, it's not set in stone because there's a few other possibilities here, things at play here. It could be a misdirect, possibly. That's always a possibility. It's a time travel narrative. But, even beyond that, not even just the time travel aspect of it, there could be something else at play here as well. But, the thing is, earlier in the episode, I did say that essentially gives us about 3 or 4 possibilities, right? Because I immediately just assumed whoever Suzuha's father is, it is going to be a named character, right? Because, this is a point I made back in episode 1. In a time travel narrative, there's always going to be this idea of relatives, people that are related that don't even know it yet, right? So this is just that at play, I think. And of course, out of those 3 or 4 possibilities, Daru is one of them, or he was one of them that was in my mind, right? So it's Okarin, Daru, Dr. Nakabachi. That was a thing that popped up in my mind as well, right? And, actually, let me kind of finish up my point about Dr. Nakabachi. There's a bit more I want to get into about Dr. Nakabachi, but, the connection there is that, he's been accused. He got checked. He got checked by Okarin back in episode 1 for plagiarizing John Teeter's talking points, his, bullet points, his journey, his claims, and all of that. And, the thing is, John Teeter's claims are going to come in quite clutch in this episode as well, right? Quite handy. Because by the end of this episode, it becomes, I think, even more likely that indeed our John Teeter is Amane Suzuha, right? Whose father is meant to be Beryl Titer, or at least goes by the moniker of Beryl Titer, right? So if if it actually does end up being Daru, that's the screen name he's been using on that forum, I suppose, right? And Amane Suzuha figured out that this is her chance, that her father actually could be this person, and they might actually show up at this get together, right? But again, if it's not Daru, and if it is, it's not Okarin, right? Or can I rule Okarin out for sure? I think, yeah. Okarine isn't there. He wasn't there, right? At the forum, at this get together. But Okarine had no plans of being there at all. Like there's no indication that Okarine even knew about this. He's actually rather surprised once Jaru brings it up. So I think it's a safe bet to just eliminate Okarine altogether from this, right? He was never meant to be there. And if you look at Amane Suzuha or her claims, she's under the impression that this is her one chance, that her father, going by the name of Beryl Tider, is most likely about to show up here, or could show up here. And of course, ultimately, Amane Suzuha never shows up again. She said her goodbyes to Okarine through a message, and she's gone. And of course, in her really unique case as a time traveler, saying goodbye and being gone means that she's gone altogether from the timeline. Or no. Let's take that back. Amane Suzuha did not time travel to another timeline. She's time traveling within this timeline, right? And of course, that iconic satellite that's been lodged into the radio building, it's gone, disappears. So, that's the thing I was saying about, okay, this is confirmation. I finally essentially have my official confirmation, right? Everything that I've been speculating about and the little profile that I had built up for Amane Suzuha, that indeed she is a time traveler, because it's not subtle. It hasn't been subtle for a long time. And that, the satellite, if you will, is essentially the time travel machine at play, right? And, even in the beginning of this episode, you see Amane Suzuha rides by, right? I suppose she's, scoping out the place and, kind of just having a good look, because in her mind, it's like, okay, I might be needing this really soon, or I am going to be needing this really soon, right? So she drives by, she has a look, and ultimately she does take it out of there. And to be a bit more specific, she gets out of 2010. And, that one shot, this is after Okarine decides indeed, it's worth it, right? He decides. And you could even say it's a bit of a selfish choice as well. But, it's interesting. It's a really interesting dynamic, because, Okarine is doing it for a good reason. He certainly believes it's for a good reason. And I do believe it's his kind heart at play again, as it is showcased throughout the episode. Especially with Suzuha, right, who he essentially looks at as a younger sibling almost, right? Like a younger sister. He really took to Amane Suzuha and her situation as well. Yet another misfit that he can relate to, right? Yes, yet another misfit that is essentially added to the Future Gadgets Lab as Labo member number 8. Right, finally, I've been asking for this. Come on, Amane Suzuha, it's like, it's right there, make her a lab member. And he does. He ultimately does, right? Of course, I'll get to that scene. It's one of the most charming moments of the entire anime for me. It's one of the most touching moments. That scene just, kind of, it actually almost made me emotional. I felt, like I said, it had me covered in goosebumps. By the time, Suzuha is laughing and just cycling out of there, right? And, she sees right through Okarine's little facade and all of that. She knows that Okarine is a good guy. She's always looked up to Okarine. That's always been my read. She just lights up anytime she sees Okarine. It's just, I don't know, it's good for her. It's always been good for her to be in Okarine's presence. Okabe Rintaro, as she calls him. But yeah, as Okarine contemplates the use of the D-mill once again, given the recent developments and the recent setbacks, and again, his mind being blown, and that's how the episode itself starts. Him being in the middle of that absolute mindfuck, that the area he grew up in, the things he's passed by hundreds of times, the shops, he name drops like 4 shops as well, right? Animate. I really liked a few of them, actually, the names for them. All of them gone, right? And he realizes just with one D-mill, all of that, the identity of the area, of this district, completely changed, right? Now, I'll quickly say this. I feel like it's... I know, some people might think I'm being a bit too critical, but I think it's a bit of a cop-out. To me, it feels like a bit of a cop-out that Ferris is in featured at all in this episode. Now, listen, I could be getting ahead of myself. Maybe she'll come right back into the next episode. Now, the reason I'm calling it a cop-out is because one of the most significant things of the entire series happened here, right? Because of that D-mail, after that D-mail that Ferris sent, right? The identity of the city shifting. It's as big as it gets, right? And I just kind of assumed that, Ferris is going to be playing a part in this episode as well at some point. I assumed maybe she is going to show up, but, again, they said she's not able to show up, at least this time, not today. So I don't know, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. Maybe I'll take that back. I don't know. It just kind of felt like, they kind of sidestepped that, almost kind of like took the easy route out. The fact that, they made the choice to not have Ferris in this episode meant that they didn't have to address that aspect of it. That was kind of my logic, my train of thought behind that. So yeah, at this point, the thing that's really clear to Okurin is the effect of these D-mails, right? The really, really significant effect of these emails, again, reiterated to a maximum by the changes showcased, right? In the city itself, in its identity, and all of that. So, taking all of that into account, he really kind of wrestles with the idea of, okay, do I dare do this again? Now, to be fair, he's only really sending this D-mail, this specific D-mail back a couple of days, or just a day before, actually, right? But that being said, it doesn't mean just because it's going back a day, right, that the choices or the changes, the slight shifts are not going to be substantial. I mean, it's exactly that, as showcased, as depicted through our butterfly, right, that flies across the screen, right, across a black screen. Now, I've seen that a couple of times at this point, right, as this indicator of, yeah, something significant has shifted, right? And, I knew, as much as I loved Okurin's mindset at that point, his thinking that, ultimately he's open to doing it for a friend, helping a friend. Even there are some selfish elements, right? Because ultimately Suzuha made that choice to not come back in and to not partake in a D-mail experiment, right? Because ultimately Suzuha is a time traveler, and maybe she decided, okay, it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk, right? Ultimately, in the new timeline, right, in the conclusion, it turns out she can't really, contact or send a D-mail to her father anyways, right? Because she's got no contact info. But the thing to also remember here is that Okurin has no idea. He still doesn't really truly know that Amane Suzuha is a time traveler. So, his initial idea, right, is, okay, let's send a D-mail to your dad, and this idea of, don't leave your daughter behind. He said that, without the knowledge of Suzuha being a time traveler. So he's not taking any of that into account, right? But yeah, ultimately Suzuha does make the choice because clearly she did not meet her father at the forum and she had to leave. As she told us and Okurin a little bit earlier, she this is her last chance, and if it doesn't play out, I've got to move on, right? Because I'm busy. I've got other things to do. So everything that's happening here, a lot of the things that are happening here, specifically in this episode, I think really finally kind of allowed me to lock in that indeed, Suzuha is our John Teeter. And of course, I'll be applying some of, John Teeter's actual, roadmap and trajectory and bullet points and talking points and claims to Suzuha, right? In terms of her, next destination, her potential next destination. As she told Okurin a little bit earlier, she's busy. She's got things to do. So, essentially, I made this point a little bit earlier as well, so the point I made was, okay, if indeed this is our John Teeter, she's essentially looking for her father instead of the real John Teeter who stops by in the year 2000 to see his mom, right? So that's, a slight change there. And yes, that is another thing I do have to keep in mind that, just because, this anime has a John Teeter, and again, I believe it is Amane Suzuha, doesn't mean that it's going to follow the exact roadmap. It already isn't. There's some, again, deviations from, the hoax John Teeter's claims, right? Here, again, you see a bit of a difference. Amane Suzuha is looking for her father instead of, stopping by to see her mom. And also, if I kind of build on that, John Teeter returns to 2000 after time traveling to 1975, right? To retrieve the IBM or the IBM 5100, right? And there, it's, this connection with his grandpa. And again, as you'll remember a few episodes ago, I believe maybe episode 5, right? In the alley, I said if Amane Suzuha is our John Teeter, she might be speaking of her grandpa, right? I said that based on the actual John Teeter's talking points and his trajectory, his roadmap, right? That this, expert that she's speaking of, that I used to know, an IBM 5100 expert, I just kind of attached that to, okay, so, her grandpa. And then, of course, the significance of John Teeter's grandpa is that he was the lead engineer, right, of the team that was responsible for the IBM 5100. So that's the reason, I kind of, at that point, tried to attach the same thing to Amane Suzuha. But now I think it's quite clear that this expert that she's speaking of at that point, or telling Ocarina about at that point in the alley, is not the grandfather, but her father, right? But here's a really, oh God, I just thought of this, man. The really sad aspect of it. She said, it's not possible anymore. And this is in response to Ocarina saying, please introduce me to this expert that you know. She said it's not possible because they died, right? Years ago. So that's incredibly sad. Just the thought of it. If indeed this is meant to be Daru, right? But yeah, that just makes everything even more sad, doesn't it? The potential of that, the possibility of that. Now, I'll come back to that. Now, let me kind of just finish up my point about, Suzuha's trajectory. Now, I'm speaking of the Suzuha that actually left in that timeline. The one right before the one I get to see in the conclusion. The New World line that Ocarina has shifted into, right? Once again, the iconic reading Steiner takes place in hell. There is actually a bit of a bombshell moment there as well in terms of perhaps the origins of that ability, right? Or the first time he actually experienced it. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up going down quite the rabbit hole once I get back to that point of the episode. But yeah, in terms of the possible direction that Suzuha is heading into, the one that actually took the time machine and got out of there, out of 2010, it remains to be seen if she's going to the past or the future. Now, of course, if I follow the John Teeter roadmap, it dictates that, Suzuha is about to go to the future, right? Because after John Teeter retrieves the IBM 5100 from 1975, he goes to the year 2000 to see his mom and, again, give them a heads up and everything about everything that's to come, right? And then he heads back to the future. But I don't know. I have no idea if Amane Suzuha or her trajectory is meant to be the exact same, right? She could be heading to the past from this point on, right? And if that's the case, then you've got 2 dates, 2 years that immediately just kind of, show up, right? That are immediately the likeliest possibilities here, the year 2000 and the year 1975. And then, of course, the year 2000, or at least close to it, is, again, a big talking point here for young Ocarina, right? In bed because of this fever of his that Mayuri actually kind of recognizes symptoms of once again, right? Or the things that he described all that time ago. Mayuri's got quite the memory, man, doesn't she? She certainly remembers. But even the timeline aspect of it is a little bit jumbled up, or it's a little bit interesting. I'll have to kind of dig into it and really kind of lock in the timeline aspect of it as well. But, Mayuri saw the same things at play at Ferris's penthouse, right? That's the thing she told him. Ocarina, you resembled or you showcased the exact same things that you described back then, right? That's how you looked. You looked out of it. Now, the thing is, others should be noticing that as well. No? Right? I mean, Daru's there. Maybe, Daru's a little bit distracted, I suppose. But even before that, he's had other moments of shifting into a different timeline. And I mean, yeah, actually, yeah, they have noticed. I suppose they have noticed, right? Makise has noticed, his strange behavior after, he does kind of, take over another Ocarine essentially, and doesn't have any memories of that Ocarine anymore, right? Because he overwrites that Ocarine's memory and, just carries his existing memories with him from timeline to timeline. The Ocarine I know since day one. But of course, another reason the year 2000 is significant here is because that's the year the IBN 5100 is donated or given to the shrine, right? And again, Ruka's father has been told that, a young man is going to come for this at some point, right? Please give it to him. Or they didn't say that, but they specified that, someday a young man's going to come looking for this, right? So there's that aspect of it as well. But if indeed it's Amane Suzuha who leaves it there, Amane Suzuha has to actually retrieve the IBN 5100 first, right? So then I suppose that kind of checks out, doesn't it? She would have to go back to 1975 to, get the IBN 5100. Again, this is following the actual John Teeter's trajectory, right? He gets the IBM 5100 back in 1975, right? So if Amane Suzuha does that and gets it from 1975, then possibly goes to 2000 to stash it, right? That, these could be the types of things that she's meant to be doing. She said, I'm busy as well, But see, here's the thing about all of this. You go back to the Ferris Cup, the first time, Ocarine and friends kind of get to find out about the IBN 5100 being stored at the shrine, because Ferris essentially said that, last she heard about it or heard of it, it was at the shrine, right? The IBN 5100 is at a shrine, right? And then of course that sends Makise and Ocarine to the shrine ultimately, and they do get it, they grab it from there. But then of course, like I said, Ruka's father said that, a young man, it was given to the shrine, and he is told by, the person who gave it to the shrine that a young man is going to come for this at some point, right? So yeah, it doesn't even mean that it has to be Suzuha specifically who has to actually go to the shrine and do it. So of course, the IBN 5100 is going to be a major, piece of the puzzle, a major piece of the narrative and all of that. And yeah, the last few episodes, the last couple of episodes actually, it's been a major talking point, right? Because it's gone missing, right? And it all begins with Kiryu Moeka sending that D-mail. But then of course, a little bit later on in another timeline, even Kiryu Moeka doesn't seem to know, right? And this is after she breaks down and said that FB said it would be there. But yeah, going back to Amane Suzuha and her potential trajectory, her potential roadmap, that's just me speaking of the timeline that Ocarine is not in anymore, right? And, let me kind of finish up my point that I was trying to make almost 15 minutes ago. That pan shot as Ocarine decides, I know the risks. I know how crazy things can get, but this is for someone I consider a friend, someone I care about, someone I do want to help as much as I can, right? A thing that really stood out to me is just how concerned Ocarine is that just in the middle of the night, perhaps deflated and just rather sad, Amane Suzuha is just lonely and leaves or decides to leave in that state, right? Ocarine just couldn't fathom that. It didn't sit right with Ocarine to just even think of that possibility that, Amane Suzuha is going through that. He felt that, she needs someone, that he needs to be there with her in this moment of need, perhaps. Like I said at one point, this is Okabe Rintaro, right? The true Okabe Rintaro. But the thing is, Suzuha might already know about all of this anyways, right? There's always that possibility of, Suzuha already knowing about Okabe Rintaro, right? Or knowing Okabe Rintaro, again, in this future that she comes from. See, that's the thing that's the thing that's kind of tough to really even speculate about, right? How many of these people are even around in that potential dystopian future? So, if now I do believe that indeed this is our John Teeter, the request that's made of of Ocarina a couple of episodes ago by John Teeter, it's essentially Suzuha asking Ocarina to be the savior, to take them beyond 1% divergence, right? True freedom and all of that. Essentially bypass this dystopian future. But to quickly kind of, build on that point, and that sad possibility that I kind of spoke of a little bit earlier, if indeed it does end up being Daru that is this barrel tighter, and indeed he is Suzuha's father, and if indeed this is that expert that she spoke of in the alley and then said, they died, or he died a couple of years ago, you have to look at it from all of that. You have to look at it from Amane Suzuha's perspective, because her saying that he died a few years ago means a few years ago from her perspective, from her dystopian future. So if it is meant to be Daru, then maybe Daru is around, right, in that dystopian future, but he died, a couple of years ago. And then, since then, Suzuha's been doing her thing, and she's been on this mission of hers. But there's also other possibilities in terms of this potential expert that died a few years ago from, again, Suzuha's perspective. Ocarina himself could be this expert that she's speaking of. Maybe Ocarina is also around, in that dystopian future. But then, of course, that brings us back to the ending of this episode. Ocarina stepped in, right? He decided that indeed he's going to send an email to himself, or sending a directive to himself, right? Even that aspect of it is a bit of a constant in time travel narratives, right? Guiding yourself or your past self. And I'm sure there's going to be much more of that ahead of me, right, in the next 14 episodes or so, because it's just one of those things, right? It's a staple of time travel narratives, right? And one of the things about that idea, it's always that, okay, the person that is being guided, right, at the time, they might not even understand. They might think that this is just insane, right? But everything is happening for a reason. But they're not really going to be able to understand any of that reasoning, right? It might feel like deception. It might feel wrong. It might feel like this could be avoided right here. I should not follow this directive. I've seen it in so many of these time travel narratives, but it's one of those things that it's just got to be done sometimes. And that ultimately they are going to gain a true understanding for those directives at some point in their own trajectory. But yeah, in this situation, it's successful, right? Amane Suzuha is still around, and you see the relief, and even how he said good morning, part-timer. It's just, I don't know, the tone there is just kind of lovely to see. And the moment he comes to on his couch, immediately just realizes and runs out there to make sure to see if indeed she's around, and indeed she is around, and she had a blast at the party last night, so I love that for her, of course. There's that really touching line of dialogue. For the first time in my life, I felt like I fit in, that I belonged, and that right there is Ocarina's doing, right? That's just his mindset. He wanted her to feel included. But yeah, I've been saying it, Suzuha is this youngster, hardened youngster at that comes from this dystopian future, a harsh reality, right? Day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, even, right? And that's the picture of the dystopian future that's been painted, that's been established, due to her slip ups and all of that, and the things that she'll say that make no sense to Ocarina. I'm just so damn happy that she gets a semblance of a normal life, right? At the end of the day, a lot of this anime, I think, a lot of this story is essentially all about that aspect of it. Bonds and friendships that are formed, friendships of a lifetime, friendships that are really rather unique in the sense that, they stay intact over timelines. Of course, there's a few different angles to approach this from, this idea of this friendship always just being there. As Ocarina also noticed in the beginning of this episode, that, even though there's this substantial change, or there's substantial changes, that friendship group remains intact, right? The relationships are essentially the same. But yeah, as a whole, since day one, since episode 1, it's one of the major aspects of this anime, this story that I've enjoyed the most, right? Just them being friends, right? And again, there's a lot of fun moments, slice of life moments. There's a lot of crazy moments at times. The craziest moment of all in this episode, incredibly out of character moment for Okarin, to the point that I actually think it's a bit of character assassination, just for the sake of kind of, having a WTF moment, like a big moment. Ultimately, I think that's the approach here. Other than that, it just makes no sense at all to have Okarin address that situation in that manner. It's so aggressive. It's so beyond anything I've actually expected Okarin to be capable of. I couldn't even think of that. That Okarin could do something like that, especially given everything he knows and understands about the D-males and how dangerous they can be and how significantly things can change and all of that, right? Hell, I actually think there's a few inconsistencies here, actually, in terms of Okarin's approach, right? Again, let's put a pin in that. I'll come back to that and everything, kind of surrounding that whole scene. But yeah, the bonds are immaculate. I love it. I love that. There's this really exciting and intriguing, compelling, time travel element and plot and all of that. And of course, the really exciting sci-fi elements and all of that. But, at the end of the day, the characters are the thing that makes the story and just one of the main reasons to really, really enjoy this anime. But yeah, as the reading Steiner does take place once again, and Okarin does see Amane Suzuha outside chilling on the bench, the number itself now, the divergence number, essentially has now gone down to 0.33. Last time it was 0.40, and then so on. So big shift, right? And again, like I said, that indication through the butterfly, right? Sure, symbolic as well, but it's literal as well. That yes, there's a massive change at hand now because of this choice that's been made. So yeah, man, let's see how things play out now that Amane Suzuha is around and didn't get to leave. Because again, her not leaving also means that, she's not going to be doing the things that she was meant to be doing. And now that she's not doing those things and she's here and is planning to stick around even longer to look for her father, means that the things that she was meant to do did not happen, right? In this timeline now, in the most current timeline, in the conclusion of this episode, right? But then there's a flip side to that as well. Right now, she is going to be around. She is going to be part of the lab. Of course, that alone is going to be quite fun and everything. But, it allows her to continue that search for her father, right? Be it Daru, be it potentially Dr. Nakabachi, right? Maybe. And again, I guess this kind of comes full circle to my initial point. The reason I, really thought of Dr. Nakabachi here is because, again, he said there's going to be a professional writer as well who's meant to show up, right? Daru said this. So I know, Dr. Nakabachi, he's had papers and all of that. He's published papers and all of that. But, again, he's been accused of plagiarism. Again, he gets clocked by Okarin in episode 1. Then he gets pulled out by Makise Kurisu, right? In the middle of that. Dr. Nakabachi, there is that connection, kind of a connection to John Teeter, even if it is through just plagiarism. If it is just that, I don't know, man. It's still not clear cut. Yes, Okarin felt that, he's just plagiarizing John Teeter or John Teeter's claims, but there could be more to it. Maybe that Dr. Nakabachi has a connection to the in-universe John Teeter. But yeah, isn't it a little bit bizarre that, Dr. Nakabachi featured in episode 1, has not been heard from since, right? And I make it a point to say that he's featured in episode 1 because episode 1 is a big deal. It's a big episode. It's a significant episode, one of the best pilots as well, I'd say. Or it's possible that I'm giving this character maybe a bit too much, importance, I mean, watch all of it just mean nothing in terms of my, potential speculation about Dr. Nakabachi, potentially being at this forum, this time travel forum as well. And maybe that was just a one-off character, just in that one episode. It's possible. It's possible. But, that's my train of thought. Daru mentioning a professional writer, I thought, in my mind, I immediately thought, is he potentially speaking of this Dr. Nakabachi? But yeah, let's kind of continue on that aspect of it. Suzuha looking for her father, right? And, telling Okarin a little bit earlier in that lovely scene, of course, that they bike to, or she makes Okarin bike to. I mean, listen, man, I just love the humor. I feel like this really speaks to me. A lot of these moments in this episode, or not this episode, in this anime, just the fun moments, the humor of it just really speaks to me, right? It's my type of humor, a lot of it. And, I've said it before in other anime content as well, that I feel that quite a bit, that anime, the humor in a lot of anime actually really gets to me. So yeah, of course, I'm always down for actual comedy anime as well. I'm not sure if it'll be content on the channel, but you'll have to excuse me. I don't actually know if this is how to say it, but Gintama or Ginitama, you're gonna, yeah, I might have botched it, but I think Gintama seems right, just based on the spelling of it. I know that's meant to be a really funny anime. But yeah, Suzuha tells Okarin that, there is a really unique and rare and essentially a one-off type opportunity coming up. And her father actually could be in this specific place. Ultimately, it becomes clear that this place is meant to be this gathering, this get-together, this forum, the time travel forum. But see, here's the thing I'm kind of maybe hung up on a bit. She said that, okay, her father, and this is, Suzuha confirming it later, right in the ending of the episode, right? That her father is someone that goes by Beryl Teeter. So does that mean in that, message board or that online forum for this specific, group, I suppose, the time travel group or forum, does that mean that Suzuha saw someone or the username of Beryl Teeter, right? That's my assumption here. So if that is the case, that means that she knew that her father goes by the username Beryl Teeter. So essentially, this idea of a specific place that Suzuha has now established for us, the audience, that, her father might show up in this specific place. Then, once it gets to Daru missing from the Future Gadgets Lab, as Mayuri noted, that was, at that point, I didn't think anything of it, right? I didn't attach it. I didn't connect it to this aspect of it. But in hindsight, that is a little bit strange, right? Daru's not known to be missing from the lab, or at least I haven't seen Daru, miss any of these meetings. He's always around, just chilling with Okarin, right? He's just like a constant. That's his thing. Him and Okarin, that's their thing. But yeah, Daru's not around, and Okarin tells us that he's actually meant to be at a get together with some of his online friends. But a little bit later on, as Okarin tricks Daru, right, into leaving the get-together and showing up at the lab, right, then something, it's like a light bulb moment, right? And not even that, because at first Daru came running in looking for Ferris, and again, it's kind of almost showcased as a comedic moment, right, that he got bamboozled, and again, like I said, he's a little bit annoyed about the whole thing. But once he name drops that it's meant to be this get-together of people that frequent the time travel forum, right? Then it registered in my mind. This is a really specific thing. It's a place, right? And again, just the subject matter of it all. Immediately, I begin to think about: is this place, this get together that Suzuha alluded to earlier? So of course, at that point, as you saw, the possibility of Daru being Suzuha's father becomes a really, concrete possibility. And of course, building on that, another really significant point that led me to that immediate, light bulb moment, at that point at least, is that Daru left. Just the notion of that, the idea of that made me think, oh my God, if it is this, Daru left, right? And if it's Daru, that's the father, Suzuha is not going to meet her father. And if indeed all of that is the case, Okarin unknowingly stopped that from happening. He stopped that reunion or just that meeting from happening, right? Father-daughter, or Suzuha getting to meet her father, if it does end up being Daru. Now, see, let's kind of dig into that a bit more. Okay, say Daru isn't tricked into coming to the Future Gadgets Lab, and he does show up at that meeting, at the forum, the time travel forum, and all of that. Okay, so say Suzuha notices Daru there. Suzuha knows Daru as Okurin's friend. She knows Daru. She knows he's just this person that's around, right? Would that mean that immediately that kind of, it's not even going to register in her mind that this could be her father, right? Because to her, it's just Daru, Okurin's friend. It's this person that she knows, this face that she knows, that she's seen around recently quite a bit. But the thing is, all of it is based on the username of Beryl Tider. So I'm assuming, once they begin to mingle there and they start, talking about their usernames, then maybe, it comes up, right? And if Daru is to say, yeah, I go by, Beryl Tider, then maybe Suzuha could clock it, right? But see, here's the thing. I'm not even sure if that aspect of it, Beryl Tider, is actually a thing in that timeline, the one I'm not in anymore, the one Okurin is not a part of anymore, right? And the only thing Suzuha has to go by is that pin. I finally get an explanation for that pin. So yeah, of course, I'll be on the lookout. Anytime Daru's on screen, I'll be looking for certain things at this point. I mean, listen, realistically speaking, and just based on everything this episode did and does, hell, there's even a shot of Daru and Suzuha in Okurin's phone, right, as he's filming. And I thought it's really quite clever to use that as a tool for Okurin to kind of relive those moments, because this Okurin, our Okurin, right, has not lived those moments. He actually hasn't, right? But it doesn't feel like a cop out. It feels just natural that it's a nice fun party and Okurin just took a few clips, right? He just wanted to record some of these people having a good time. But yeah, they show us a bunch of different scenes, Suzuha still having to go at Makise and all of that. And then, the dialogue continues, the conversation continues. Then it cuts back to Okurin, right? And this is after he kind of has that moment as well, as he hears it from Suzuha that she was also at that thing, at that gathering, right? And he knows Daru was meant to be there. So maybe even Okurin is kind of thought of that possibility at this point. Maybe, given his surprise reaction. And then, of course, it cuts back to Okurin looking at his phone. I mean, it literally shows us a frame of Daru and Suzuha. And again, this is after, all these little things begin to add up about, Daru potentially being Suzuha's father. So, it's all right there. It'd be silly to ignore some of these things. But is it set in stone? No. But if at this point you're to ask me who's the likeliest out of all the, different possibilities, again, it'd be silly not to say Daru at this point. But yeah, just the idea of Daru actually being the prime candidate here for, for being her father, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because up until this point, I just didn't even think about Daru or him being a potential father. I mean, anyone, listen, here's the thing, these are young people. Daru is still young. It's a really specific phase of his life. Think about yourself at that age. Yeah, I'm a totally different type of person now, right? Some things are a constant, of course, but there's a lot of things that are just different, and that comes with experience and age and all of that. So yeah, of course, maybe this Daru doesn't quite scream, father figure and all of that, right? Or even being a potential father to anyone. But yeah, just naturally with time and, experience, sure, even Daru can become someone who could be a good father, that could be a father to someone. But yeah, ultimately, even if that does end up being the case and that Okurin did possibly keep them apart unknowingly, the fact that, after that D-mill, Suzuha is still around now means that there's more chances. There's still more chances of her potentially getting to meet her father, right? Especially if it is Daru, because they're in such close proximity almost daily, right? So interesting episodes ahead, I suppose. But yeah, it certainly continues that trend of father-daughter relationships, right? Here's yet another one, right? Again, if Suzuha is John Teeter, they've switched it up. Instead of John Teeter going to see his mom, it's John Teeter going to see his dad. So yeah, you've got Suzuha and her father, you've got Ferris and her father, you've got Makise Kurisu and her father, and you also have Ruka and her father. That's highlighted, or at least Makise saw it as something quite nice, right? Again, that comes from that really unique position she finds herself in. I mean, unique in the sense that, there's that lack of relationship that she longs for with her father, right? It's been clear to both Ocarina and I since that episode, right? And even here, you see she's the one that's hopeful that she's probably out there spending quality time with her father at the moment. This is around the time they're all hanging around and the food's ready. But the thing is, Ocarina kind of dismisses all of them, that they're free to go, but they didn't even eat. The food looked untouched because, again, they're holding on for Suzuha to show up. So did they not eat any of that food and just kind of left for the night? I hope not. But yeah, even earlier, she said no. She said no to Ocarina as far as to, tailing her, right? And you saw her reaction there. I thought maybe, this is that unique situation. If Ocarina is going to tail her and he ends up at that place, in a place that, Suzuha is meant to be. And if indeed Ocarina is meant to be the father, that's how he ends up showing up at that place, right? Because he's tailing Suzuha. So, you saw my reaction there. That was my thought process at that moment. But, Maki said, just shut it down. I mean, hell, there actually is another one. Mr. Braun and Nai, right? That's always, fun to see. It's always fun to see Nai show up, and then, that dynamic and, her dynamic with this little group. She loves Mayuri. She's a little bit, she's a little bit afraid of Ocarina, but she's also quite fond of the part-timer, right? Amane Suzuha. So yeah, a lot of father-daughter relationships. All right, man, let me just kind of touch up on that disastrous moment, man. Just one of the most cringe-inducing, uncomfortable, disappointing writing moments of this anime. And it's just, it feels so out of place. It felt so wrong. And, also because, I like Ocarina. I really do. And, that's not something I thought he's capable of doing, right? Now, yes, I know some people might say, okay, let's, cut him some slack. I don't know. I don't even know if anyone's going to say that, but I'm trying to look at it, from maybe a different angle. Like, okay, yeah, he's jumping from timeline to timeline and, reading Steiner, and he's already decided. But, as you'll remember, I said, be careful, he's already just kind of almost chalked it off as, oh, it's a failure. That D-Mill experiment was unsuccessful. Of course, Ruka is not a girl in this timeline, right? He wrote it off immediately. And I knew then and there, okay, this is going to be interesting, to say the least, right? Because sooner or later, I mean, at first, surprisingly, it didn't really come up, but, my expectation was that it is going to come up at some point, and it does. God damn, does it come up, and it is addressed. And again, given Ocarina's definitive stance, yeah, you see how it plays out, and it's just insane. Because in order for that to happen, right, so many things have to be overlooked. So many things have to be sidestepped, to the point that it begins to feel like character assassination, right? Just for this moment, to get this moment out of it, like a WTF moment, the type of moment people talk about, right? Again, a moment for laughs, I suppose, but I'm not really sure who exactly is going to be laughing at this. I mean, listen, I know, I know there's going to be people that find it funny, just the whole bizarre, uncomfortable, fucked up nature of it. I know there's people out there that are going to find it funny, right? But you could just tell, it's not a mystery. You can tell that they thought that they're going to be having like a WTF funny moment, right? Like a gag. I feel like that's their thought process on it. The people who wrote this, and I say people who wrote this because I know it comes from a from a game, essentially, right? So I'm not even sure if there's just one specific person. You'll have to let me know. Perhaps I'll just find out on my own at some point. And, the crazy thing is, in the immediate follow-up scene, or, it's a bit of a prolonged scene of him and Amane Suzuha, you do get to see the true Okabe Rintaro. I pointed it out. I was just so happy. And yeah, the whole scene, like I said, it gave me goosebumps by the time it ended. It made me so happy. This is Ocarina. So to have that moment right before, it just felt so off, right? Because okay, say that he actually truly just felt, okay, yeah, it's impossible, it can't happen, right? Even though he's seen just how many crazy things are possible, the extent of it, the magnitude of it, right? The D-mills and altering certain things, to the point that, hell, he's seen a whole city's identity shift, right? And shops go missing because that culture is not introduced anymore. And, his train of thought there before, the intro kicked in was that Ferris's intention, that she actually wanted to undo that, this idea of her being responsible for introducing that culture, Moe culture. And then I suppose that includes, again, collector, otaku, anime culture, all of that. So Ocarine thought maybe it's for that reason, right? And like I said, I thought it's more so to do with her father, right? And you see, you just see almost immediately how fond she is of her father. I mean, yeah, it's her father at the end of the day. I mean, the way they actually showcase it, it's almost as if, this is her hero, right? As he's just walking out towards the door, she's got that beaming smile on her face. And, she's just, there's that reaction as well, right? That, oh, that's my father. But yeah, the point is, Ocarine has had more than enough experiences at this point to know just how crazy this whole thing can get, the D-mill aspect of it, right? So for him to just completely shut that down, and even in the face of, evidence and just things becoming a bit more clear that, okay, Ocarine, look at this, you're an intelligent fellow, just, go with the flow and just back off a bit, right? And instead he doubles down. He goes all in, right? And okay, let's for a second assume that, okay, yeah, he's going all in. He doesn't believe for a second that she's actually a girl now. Why the hell is that his method of choice? There's so many other things that you could possibly, put into play, or, you could possibly try to, figure out through other means. Why the hell did they decide that this is how Ocarine is really going to confirm it to everyone? By groping Ferris, right? And again, from the outside looking in, that's essentially assault. That's sexual assault, right? Or harassment, sexual harassment, I suppose. Yeah, it's just so bizarre, man. So bizarre. Okay, just as a hypothetical, if Ruka is still a guy, he's going to grab this guy's crotch, he's going to grab this guy's penis. Like, the more I think about it, the more bizarre it becomes, right? Even more so than before, right? It's just, it's silly. It's beyond silly to take this approach. And like I said, it is out of character for Ocarine to be doing something like this, right? Given that he's so accepting of everyone, and people's nature and just how people are, right? So yeah, I don't know, this idea of him doubling down to that extent to prove that no, I'm not trying to, be mean here. I'm not trying to be, rude. Ruka is a guy and I can prove it to you, I mean, for us audience, it becomes clear that indeed Ruka is a girl now, right? There's some telltale signs even in that episode, right after the D-mill goes out. Right, and reading Steiner takes place. You have things like Mayuri saying Ruka-chan, and you just by looking at it, you can tell that Ruka is now into cosplay, right? Because before that, Ruka immediately just kind of shut that down. It's not really my thing, and Mayuri's a little bit sad about the whole thing, right? And then again in this episode, it becomes even more clear. Right, as Ocarine comes in, you see Ruka continues to be rather excited about the book that Mayuri has, the cosplay book, and they're talking about, oh, could you pull this off? Could maybe you pull this off? Oh, maybe I don't quite have the proportions for it, and all of that, right? Yeah, it's clear at that point that yes, Ruka is a girl now, and then of course, Ruka is in the same school uniform as Mayuri, so it's clear. Right? To us, it's clear. So of course, dramatic irony at play, but it's just it's a crazy type of dramatic irony at play because Ocarine should be seeing some of these signs. He should be noticing some of these things. And even in the middle of it, he should still be able to kind of, pull back, right? Upon realizing, oh, okay, hold on. Maybe they did actually succeed, with that D-mill experiment. So let me just kind of back up a bit about all of this and maybe find out in a different manner. But no, he doubles down. He goes all in. But let's kind of look at a bit of the follow-up. I mean, it's kind of done off screen, isn't it? it's clear that, they patched things up. I mean, I'm hoping and expecting that he tried to explain it to Makise Kurisu and to the rest as well. And he kind of, brought them up to date on the whole thing that, there was a D-mail and, that Ruka wanted this and all of that. I mean, even explaining it probably sounds kind of far-fetched, but see, that brings up another inconsistency here. This idea of Okurin all of a sudden now stopping, right? Stopping as in he's just not even sharing any of these changes anymore. Just recently, over the span of the last few episodes, you see that he catches Makise up on some of these things, right? Makise, there's a moment she's like, so I'm to believe that, this Kiryu Moeka never became a lab member, and that, the IBN 5100 is now gone, even though, both of us carried it here after finding out the location and all of that. And then, of course, he discusses the Lotto 6 experiment, the D-mail experiment, right? And catches them up on that aspect of it, right? But now, all of a sudden, he's kind of retreating back into his shell, even though they all know about the D-mail experiments and the changes that are possible because of it, right? Now, he's not talking about, this massive change in the city. He didn't bring it up with Daru, and you saw my reaction to that. I was rather surprised about the whole thing. He clearly didn't bring it up, with the rest of them either, Makise included. So actually, I'm not even sure if even off screen he brought that up. The Ruka D-mail experiment, right? But it's bizarre. Again, it's a really bizarre writing choice by kind of having them patch things up off screen, because of course they had to kind of reconcile after that. It's a big moment, right? You see that Ruka's like crushed. It's traumatizing for Ruka. She's shaking at one point. And then of course, on top of it all, it's been clear since day one that Ruka actually has a crush on Okurin, right? And this is, again, from Ruka's perspective, this is how Okurin sees her, right? She doesn't know about that whole aspect of it, the D-mail aspect of it. Ruka believes that Okurin looks at her as someone who's not even, someone he could be interested in, right? Only because, Okurin is shown to be a hetero male, right? So in Ruka's mind, right, as she said, so this is how you've always seen me, right? It's even more crushing, isn't it, right? And the funny thing is, I mean, it's not funny, but the interesting thing is Okurin actually does find Ruka attractive, but, again, there's that bridge that he cannot cross, right? There's that scene, in Ruka's first appearance, right? He's describing that, Ruka is more feminine than Mayuri, more slender than Mayuri, and all of that, right? One of the most feminine, people he's ever met, and all of that. But then he'll try to remind himself, but he's a dude. And then of course, around the time Mayuri kind of strong arms Ruka into cosplaying, you see Okurin's reaction to that once again, right? I remember saying, "Gather yourself, man," right? He loses control. Both him and Daru. So yeah, man, I'm not even sure how exactly they patch things up off screen to the point that, you see Ruka's back in and, everything's normal again. And Makise, who was really quite agitated, perhaps not even agitated enough in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, everything's back to normal, essentially, right? So clearly off screen, yeah, they patched it up. But yeah, it's a bit of a cop-out. The approach, it's bizarre in its approach. But of course, ultimately, I'm quite happy that things are patched up, right, somehow. Because, later there's that really fun moment. Again, fun scenes of them just hanging out together, right, preparing that meal. Again, a lot of really comedic moments. Turns out Mayuri's not the most, I don't know, she doesn't really know much about cooking or anything, right? Preparing meals and all of that. Yeah, I love that. Just love that, them just being friends and all of them kind of coming together, right? It's a big group now. It's a big group because in the beginning, right, Future Gadgets Lab, it only had 3 members: Mayuri, Mayushi, right, Daru, and Okurin himself. I'll never forget that introduction, right? The fisheye lens and all of that, breaking the fourth wall and all of that, speaking to me as an audience member. So look at that now. You've got 8 members total. And it's lovely to see, of course, right? And you go to that really poignant moment in the dark as, both Makise specifically really kind of opens up here. And then Okurin as well, right? For me, I guess I just wanted some friends. Just his whole idea, behind the Future Gadgets Lab. Look at that now, man. He's got a lot of those friends, right? But the thing is, this idea of Okarin having that fever back then, right? If Okarin is super young at that point, Mayuri must have been even younger. I saw a glimpse of it. It's one of the cutest moments, one of the cutest shots. Young Mayuri out there by herself. That's a little bit concerning, though. At night, again, praying to the sky, as she put it, 3 times specifically, and then of course the next day Okarin is fine, because ultimately it's not really a fever, is it? It just kind of did a number on him, reading Steiner, that is. But let's focus on that. Young Okarin experienced reading Steiner, and reading Steiner takes effect anytime the timeline changes, right? Or the world line changes into a different one. But here's the thing. Young Okarin, that Okarin is not the one doing the changing, is not the one shifting the timeline, the world line. Someone else is, right? And it's around the year 2000, right? So it checks out. Some of these dates, they always kind of line up. So there's someone else doing their thing around that time, right? But see, here's the thing. If that young Okarin experienced reading Steiner, right, that means, I don't know if you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, or maybe just kind of let it play out. But if that's the case, and that young Okarin is experiencing reading Steiner, one thing's for sure: he's switched into a different timeline, right? That's the only time reading Steiner takes place. From that point on, that young Okarin might be a little bit confused, right? Some of the things might not make sense to him from that point on, right? I'm trying to think, because I'm trying to maybe connect that to this idea of Okarin developing this thing, this mask of his to protect himself, this persona of his, right? Now, again, I have no idea if it actually developed that early for him. But, the connection I was trying to make here is that maybe since, this younger Okarin, got shifted into a different timeline and is a little bit confused about some of the things that are happening, because again, the concept there is that our Okarin is the one that just takes over another Okarin. So if that young Okarin is taking over another young Okarin, there's going to be a few things that are going to feel a bit different to him, right? Things that might not quite check out. And again, in those formative years, maybe, it did a bit of a number on him, right? It actually maybe played a part in him developing a bit of a, I don't know, not a complex, but I don't know, just this whole notion of, again, kind of protecting himself, right? Feeling the need to protect himself. Now, again, I could be really off base here, because maybe I'm still not quite understanding, how exactly things are playing out here, right? I think one thing I can say for sure, if reading Steiner is taking place, that Okarin, the young Okarin, did move into a different timeline, right? He shifted into a different timeline. And I suppose I'm to assume that since then, it did not happen again until the events of episode 1, right? The radio building incident, the Makise Kurisu getting stabbed incident in that D-mill, right? But the thing is, Okarin just completely forgot about it. But it's Mayuri who remembered, right? To the point that, she felt that these are the same symptoms that she saw all that time ago, right? And again, in the penthouse just quite recently. But yeah, in terms of who possibly moved the timelines or shifted the world lines at that point in time, I don't know, man. There's a few possibilities. CERN could be at play. They could be. Amane Suzuha, possibly. But yeah, see, Amane Suzuha is not. Yeah, Amane Suzuha is doing a different type of time travel. Again, the more traditional time travel. That's all but confirmed because, again, of the missing satellite that I've always kind of claimed to be Amane Suzuha's time machine, right? Interesting. Let's put a pin in that, man. This is an interesting development. This idea of perhaps, his ability, his reading Steiner, all-seeing eye, being awakened and all of that, right? That perhaps it was dormant But yeah, that's Mayuri for you. She's the one who remembers all of these things. Even Okurin himself forgot all about it. But let's kind of focus on the things that led to that scene, right? Mayuri being quite concerned and, finally addressing that he doesn't seem himself, right? And this is after he's really spooked, right? Rightfully so. And that's clearly the intention behind all of this. It's deliberate. It's by design, be it through someone from CERN or, again, the other possibility I'm trying to allude to throughout those moments is it could be someone that is actually, on Okurin's side, from Okurin's side, right? Hell, it could be Okurin himself, right? And it kind of begins to bring that idea of guiding himself again, back into the fold, right? Guiding yourself and all of that as a heads up, essentially, right? So yeah, there's a few possibilities there. But again, the message itself, red jello, I mean, it's pretty clear cut, the meaning behind it. Okurin understands, but right there, if it is someone from CERN, they know that Okurin knows about the whole, jellification, I think, aspect of it, right? That, they read the reports, the Jellyman's report, and all of that. Okay, hold on. I'm getting stuck up on this again, just like last episode. Now, technically, based on the information I have, even Okurin should not know about the Jellyman's report, the actual specific details of it. Again, the jellified humans, the Jelmans, and all of that. But again, Makise Kurisu knew all of it, right? So I was kind of, that was a bit of a head scratcher for me. But, in this specific case, if Makise Kurisu does know, then you have to assume that, of course, both Daru and Okurin also know as well. But that's a bit of a, there's just, there's something missing there. Why do they know? How exactly do they know if they don't have the IBN 5100 to crack the code to get to that part of the report? But to end it off, Okabe Rintaro, right? I see once again the real Okabe Rintaro, the things that he represents, right? His unique charm and ability to bring these people together, his unique relationships with each and every one of them. He's got a really fun and unique dynamic with all of them individually. Okabe Rintaro is unique, he's special, his spark, the thing that makes him exceptional, is always there, right? So, it's that moment that happens, that it's such a manufactured moment to have this, big anime crazy moment, right? Crazy scene. The whole thing just feels manufactured, right? That is not Okabe Rintaro. It's just not. It just felt so out of character. I saw Okabe Rintaro do his thing in this episode. He simply could not allow himself. It's not even possible for him to, look the other way as, he gets to learn a bit more about Suzuha and, her search for her father, right? That's Okabe Rintaro. That's his nature. He just couldn't allow himself the thought of, Suzuha leaving in that manner, alone and disappointed and sad, right? Yes, a part of that ends up becoming a bit of a selfish choice as well on his part, but, his heart's in the right place in that moment. He's thinking about Suzuha, how she must be feeling in this moment, alone, and that she needs people around her. She needs at least me, to accompany her for maybe even a few moments, right? This is Okabe Rintaro. And I believe that even if, he is this broke student, right? And again, that's used to comedic effect on many occasions. I do feel that he is such a rich person because of the connections, the bonds that he's developed and facilitated. He's essentially this lightning rod for all of these people that he brought together. This is a kind, caring, and loving individual, right? Who also happens to have quite the personality, larger than life personality. And yeah, man, 10 episodes of Steins Gate. I've thoroughly enjoyed Okabe Rintaro and all of his friends. It's been a blast. And I'm incredibly excited for the next 10 episodes, for the next 14 episodes and beyond. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. I've got to say, I appreciate anyone who drops by in the comments. This is a little bit older, of course. This anime is a little bit older, so it's not really truly something that most people are actively looking for. But the people that do follow my content, subscribers, even non-subscribers that follow my content, I know you might be looking for this stuff, but I appreciate anyone who drops by in the comments, right? And I'm always happy to check out your thoughts on the matter. As a content creator, the people that show up are the ones that matter the most, right? This content is for you, so I appreciate it. And also, if you are interested in early access to the next few episodes right now, immediate access, and also full opacity, timer-based full length, consider checking out the Patreon page and also supporting the channel in the process of it all. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.